Hello, everyone. This is Tony, also known as TP Holt on Board Game Geek, and we are here today to play a playthrough of a new game called Combat from Compass Games. It's designed by Ross Mortel. It has very much a feel of an older game called Ambush, which is a favorite of a lot of gamers, and I certainly can see why. And hopefully, through this playthrough, you'll also see what's going on. We're going to play the introductory scenario number 1, A Meeting of Patrols. It takes place in June of 1944 in France. We're going to use the Hedgerows map, but only columns 18 through 35, which is basically the right-hand side. This is column 18. Here's column 35. The left-hand side of the map over here will not be used in this scenario. Just a little blurb of text here. With the beachhead expanding and your unit put into the line, your squad is ordered to send a 6-man patrol into the hedgerows forward of the company to determine enemy's position and strength. Now, the scenario will tell us who our enemy forces will be. We'll have some from the blue team and some from the red team. And you'll see these numbers here tell us specifically which enemy character markers to use. Here's a look at an enemy marker, and you can see the number down here, 16. And so the scenario book identifies precisely which enemy marker to use. And speaking of markers, let's just talk about this right up front. Yes, my game, like everybody else's game, came with marker sheets 1 and 2, the big 1-inch markers, having the wrong backs. The backs were rotated 180 degrees. There are plenty of options to get around that. The option I chose to use is to print out the back sides onto a sticker label and then stick them onto the back, and that's what I've done here. So I can get the right back on the right sticker. You can kind of see the red showing through. This did have a red back instead of the blue. But my sticker skills are not very good, and as a result, you can see some white hanging out and around along the edges. I just want to assure you that is all on me. It is not the counters themselves. It is me having horrible sticker skills. Okay, so the setup is that you put all of these forces. These are going to be your opponents. I've already taken the liberty ahead of time to go ahead and set those up in our draw cup. And then what we'll do is we'll draw and place them on these hexes here. In the end, it's going to be 3 separate groups of 4. And so we'll go ahead and place the first character, and that one goes on hex number 2205. Here is the character. It's a red character. He goes on 2205, which is right there. The next enemy character will go on 2305. It's another red. 2305 goes there. The next is on 2405. And another red character. Getting lots of reds here. And finally, the fourth one of this group goes on 2406. And we get a blue character. 2406 goes right here. It should be noted you put 26 characters into the cup. 9 of them are dummy characters, and we won't know that until it comes time for that character to be more apparent in the game. And so about 1 and 3 of the characters are dummy characters, and the 26 characters combined are evenly split between red and blue. The next character is another red character, and we're going to place him on 2704. That's right there. Next character will go on 2803. Another blue. Way up here. The third character of this group goes on 2904. Another blue character. And finally, the fourth character in this group goes on 3004. That's another blue character. goes here. So through two groups, we're evenly split, 4 of each. Our final group of characters, the first one goes on 2908. It's another red character. 2908 is here. Next character goes on 3008. Another blue character. This one goes on the rocks. Next character is 3009, which will go on the tree right in front of the rocks, another blue. And then this last character will go on 3108. If it's a red, will be evenly split. And it's a blue, so we actually have more blue than red characters out there. That's the end of the initial setup of the German enemy character setups. You'll see here our friendly forces. We have 3 choices, option 1, option 2, and option 3. I'm going to choose option 2. Now option 2 says to choose Corporal Thomas. And here's Corporal Thomas. And 2 other Charlie Team Riflemen. And here are the 2 characters I've selected, Private Stubbs and Private Walsh. You'll see they have slightly different statistics. And then it also says to choose 2 riflemen from Baker Team. And that's what I've done. I've chosen Private Johnson and Private Miller. Again, different statistics. But then I've also chosen, and I'm told to choose 1 Baker Team bar gunner. And that's Private Goldstein. Now you'll look here, slightly different artwork indicating it's a bar gun versus what Private Miller here has for his M1 gun. So those are my 6 friendly characters that I've selected. They will be the players that I am dealing with today. There are special rules in every scenario, and they're listed right here. Specifically for this scenario, no events. Events are one of the things that this introductory scenario does not cover. It also doesn't cover anything to do with night fighting, doesn't do any off-board artillery. It has very, very little to do with height changes in line of sight, although that could come into play. It could have a little bit of smoke to come into play. Additionally, you'll see here the enemy level, default alert level is alert. Enemies can be alert or waiting. The difference there is an alert enemy character gets an order when it comes time. A waiting enemy character does not get an order when it comes time. Says the default morale level is normal for the enemy, and also the default morale level for friendly forces are normal. There are 7 different morale levels. Each one of them has markers, and I can show you some markers here, 4 different default levels. And you get a look at them here, including normal. However, the rules state, and I kind of agree it's a good idea, that for the default markers or the default level, you don't put a marker out on the board for those characters. And the reason for that is because these characters have a chance to have several markers already on them. It's best not to clutter up the rest of the board with even more markers. There's a second page to the setup. Enemy is prepared. An enemy can either be prepared or unprepared. In this case, all enemy characters will be prepared. An unprepared enemy takes longer to react the first time when it meets the enemy, our friendly forces. We'll start with a starting hand size of 3 cards. And that's these cards here. This is the friendly deck of cards that we will use to give our orders, initiatives, and perhaps other special things. I'll go ahead and choose 3 cards. I'll set the others aside. We'll use more of them later for various reasons. Here are the 3 cards that I've chosen. You'll see they all say friendly. I've got 2 discard cards and 1 order card. The difference is, and then they all have initiative values. These cards will be played one per turn for initiative, and initiative determines order, who goes first in an impulse. With an order, if you play it for an initiative, you also will deal with the order, and we'll talk about that if and when it happens. Discards you can play from your hand during a turn to get its effect. Usually it's a good effect. So those are our 3 starting cards that we'll start out with. Next it says we can set up our characters in any hex starting in a triangle that starts here at 1814, comes all the way down to the bottom here, and then all the way over to about right here. I'm going to go ahead and set my characters up in 2 different teams, Charlie team and Baker team. Charlie team I'm going to set up here with Corporal Thomas, here with Private Walsh, here with Private Stubbs, and Baker team I'm going to set up down here with Private Johnson, Private Miller, and Private Goldstein. My goal, and the goal of the game, is to scout out the Germans, see what's going on, and get victory points. Well, how do you get victory points, you might ask? Good question. Right here are the victory conditions in the scenario book, all the different possible ways you can get victory points, and then how many victory points they are. Basically, it boils down to kill or capture an enemy soldier, you get victory points. Have a character be wounded or killed of your own group, you lose victory points. You also lose victory points if any of the enemy characters exit off the bottom edge of the board. And additionally, there are 4 hexes on the board that if one of your friendly forces moves into that hex, you gain victory points. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some miscellaneous markers that we're not using in this scenario. These happen to be for civilians. I'm actually just going to mark on the board where those hexes are so that I know where I want my guys to go. First one is in hex 2006. Then we have hex 2703, which is way up here. The third one goes to hex 2913, which is this house hex. And the fourth and final one goes into hex 3304, which is way up here. Every time or once one of my soldiers moves into any of those 4 hexes, I get 4 victory points. All right, the next in the setup says place the compass counter in hex 1902 with the 1 pointing to hex 1802. This is a misprint. According to the designer Russ Mortel on Facebook or on Board Game Geek, this should actually say pointing to hex 1801. And so I'm going to go ahead. This is the compass marker, and I'm going to go ahead and put this in 1902 with the 1 pointing to 1801. What this does is that compass marker controls movement direction, mainly for the enemy characters, but it can also be for your characters in certain situations. And so it's important to get those numbers in the right direction. As originally put in the book, it was pointing in a different direction, and that had characters moving in a direction unintended by the designer, and very much greatly changed how the scenario played out. So we'll go ahead and do that. Next, we're going to produce wind. The wind direction, we do that just by rolling a 1d6 and referring to our compass. I roll that, it rolls a 1, which means wind is rolling or blowing in the direction of 1. So I'm just going to put that there. Wind can come into play with grenades and smoke. So we've got that done. All right, now we need to talk about special rule number 10. Normally, when you give orders to the enemy characters, you do so by drawing cards. Again, here's the enemy card deck. And I'll place those on our mat. However, for the very first turn only, instead of picking a card for their orders, we'll roll a die and give the order as appropriate here. And so that's what that rule says, and we'll talk more about that when that pops up. There are a few other pieces of information listed here. At the start of turn number 4, enemy reinforcements will appear on the board. The game itself is 7 turns long. And in the scenario, enemy characters can exit from any board edge. There is a rule in the game that normally limits where enemy soldiers can move off of the board. In this particular scenario, that is a rule that's ignored. We then have the victory conditions, which we've already talked about. And then the very last thing is victory level. It'll tell you how well you've done based on how many victory points you have. That's it for the setup. I'll just give you a quick look here at my player aids that I've got. I've got a couple of them listed here. This one here, you'll see I've got the enemy cards. I've got the friendly cards. Here's where you'll play initiative information. And then over here to the right, or I'm sorry, to the left, you'll see I've got a turn tracker. We're on turn number 1. I've got impulses. Each turn is divided into 4 impulses. We'll talk more about that as we get into the game. And then I've got different markers that I will put here on the initiative track. That'll tell me which team goes first. There are 4 teams in this scenario. There is Baker team and Charlie team for friendly forces. There is the red team and the blue team for enemy characters. There are several other teams in the game, but they're not used in this scenario. All right, so that's the end of the setup, and we'll be right back for turn 1.